Hello everyone and welcome to Bathroom Brews, the budget deck tech series proving magic isn't pay to win. Each deck in this series will have a budget of $50 excluding the cost of the commander. And in this video, I'm going to take an old powerhouse of the format, Karador Ghost Chieftain, and give him a new coat of paint. If you could please give this video a like, it only takes a second and really helps out the channel. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. Karador cares about having creatures in the graveyard. Filling the yard is pretty easy to do with cards like Stitcher Supplier, but why not cycle a bunch of creatures to fill up the yard instead? That will let us draw cards, and then we can use reanimation spells to cheat big beaters into play. While Abzan isn't the traditional cycling colors, we still have some of the best support for the theme in the game. We get access to Fluctuator to reduce the cycling cost of our cards, and then Astral Drift and Astral Slide to blink creatures with ETBs. Then we have the cycling creature payoffs from Ikoria with Drannith Healer, Flourishing Fox, and Valiant Rescuer. These cards will give us life, turn into a massive threat all on their own, or make a bunch of tokens so we can go wide. Then we can also put some keyword counters on creatures with Titanith Rex, Splendid Mare, and Void Beckoner. When we cycle these creatures, we can put a Trample, Lifelink, or Death Touch counter on creatures respectively. Because cycling traditionally draws us cards, we can include the Draw 2 payoffs such as Gurgling Anointer, Gixian Puppeteer, and Jolriel. Not only do these cards help us win the game, but Anointer and Puppeteer will let us reanimate creatures we've cycled away. Some of the best pseudo-cycling support cards in the deck are Sir Conrad, Psychosis Crawler, and Bone Miser. Sir Conrad and Crawler will help us drain out the table, and what I consider to be our backup win condition. Don't worry, I'll cover the primary win con at the end. While we have Bone Miser to give us incidental value just while we execute our game plan. And since we're going to be filling our graveyard to the brim with creatures, I've included Oversold Cemetery and Marin of Clan Neltoth to return creatures to our hand each turn, allowing you to cycle the same creature multiple times in a game. Marin has the added benefit of reanimating creatures later in the game when you don't need to cycle them, or returning cards like Sakura Tribe Elder for ramp. Now sadly, Karador requires us to cast creatures from the graveyard, so if we cycle a creature with a huge mana cost, it'll be multiple turns before we have enough mana to realistically cast it. Thankfully, that's where our Reanimation Package comes in. Life and Death, Phyrexian Delver, and Dread Return. All of these felt like auto-includes in here. Life and Death and Delver are budget replacements for Reanimate, while Dread Return is simply great since it has Flashback. Other reanimation spells I've included are Victimize, Unearth, and Living Death. Traditionally, cycling will draw us cards. However, there are quite a few cards that when we cycle them, we get lands into our hand instead. The best of these are Angel of the Runes, Gloomfang Mauler, and Generous Ent, getting us non-basic plains, swamps, or forests. This is great even on a budget thanks to the common dual lands we got in Kaldheim and Dominaria United. Sadly, we're still waiting on a complete cycle for Scattered Groves and Canopy Vista, but I've included both of those in this list anyways. But we need a way to play all these tap lands from our hand since the deck will be going a little bit slower given the mana base. And that's where Burgeoning comes in. Now this is the most expensive card in the deck, but with the amount of ramping it'll provide over the course of the game, it's a great include. Now, if you don't want to spend the $15 on Burgeoning, the Gitrog monster is a great replacement option. I went with Burgeoning, but I think you can't go wrong with either option. Also, Exploration is surprisingly cheap now at about $5, so that's an option as well. Don't worry, we still have budget ramp with Sakura Tribe Elder, Solemn Simulacrum, and Sun Titan in the creature slots. While Sun Titan isn't traditionally used as ramp, with the amount of lands we'll be cycling, I'll count it as ramp in this case. For our on-theme ramp, we have Shepit Monitor, Edge of Autumn, and Migration Path. They let us ramp early, and then later in the game we can cycle them away. For removal, we have Barrier Breach, which I think is an underplayed card in general. It lets us exile up to 3 enchantments for 3 mana. That's such a great rate, and we can cycle it. And there's Wilt, which I think is also underplayed in budget decks. And because we want to protect our graveyard, Repopulate acts as both Graveyard Hate and Graveyard Protection when we need it. And finally, let's talk about the best card in the deck, Herald of the Forgotten. Now we do have to hardcast it, but getting to 8 mana in this deck shouldn't be a problem. Once we do cast it, we get to put all of our cycling permanents from the graveyard onto the battlefield. This will be our go-to win condition, as turning a bunch of big creatures sideways is usually enough to win the game in lower power pods. I usually don't discuss cards I've cut unless they were too expensive. However, there is a cycle I want to talk about, the Commander Storm cycle. That's Skull Storm, Genesis Storm, and Imperial Storm. Because Karador doesn't care about commander attacks all that much thanks to his cost reduction ability, if you have a sacrifice outlet, you can cast Karador multiple times during the game, and these can become backup win conditions very quickly. I didn't know what to cut to add them, but if you want to try them out, I highly recommend it. And then one last bonus bit. I actually created another version of this deck with only creatures using a Moray as a companion. While I think the companion version is definitely weaker, it still seems like a blast to play. I'll include a link to both decks in the video description below, and if you'd like to see a follow-up video on the companion deck, let me know in the comments.